Honestly, I used to think that hell was other people, like that quote, from Sartre. But no, hell is a homeowners association run by a woman named Victoria Sterling, and I swear to God, this is the true story of how I had to weaponize a 400-page rulebook against her own obsessive need for control. It was the most satisfying, most insane 18 months of my life. A total descent into HOA madness. I'm Elias Vance, just a remote coder, right? And all I ever wanted was a little peace, a nice house in this community called Oakhaven Glades. You know, the type of place where all the lawns are so perfect you wonder if the grass is fake, where the quiet is enforced, not chosen. It was a place obsessed with status, where a slightly misplaced garden gnome felt like a societal collapse. I loved my house, I loved the little backyard, and I loved my plan to plant a small orchard and a hedge of camellias, those deep crimson, shouting red flowers. They were going to be beautiful, a big, gorgeous splash of color right across the street from Victoria's place, which was all pale wisteria, that creamy vanilla and lavender purple, the color of absolute, cold conformity and unchallenged authority. I saw my camellias as a small act of defiance, a tiny spark of life in her refrigerated world. And that's what started everything. Not the flowers, not yet, but the moment I decided to paint my curb. See, in the HOA covenants, the curbs had to be marked as no parking zones for community safety, and deep crimson was the designated color. I bought a can, I taped it off, and I painted a clean, beautiful, solid red line, exactly where it was supposed to be. Great, one task done, I thought, and moved on with my life, already forgetting about it. But just 2 days later, I got the first violation notice, a heavy, glossy envelope with the HOA seal embossed on it, delivered like a royal summons demanding instant attention. I cracked it open, and I noticed the paper stock was heavier than a typical bill. It wasn't about that I painted the curb. It was about the shade of the red. Mr. Vance. The notice read, in this just atrocious, bossy serif font, clearly designed to look important. The crimson hue utilized on your property's curb marking has been subjected to specialized spectroscopic analysis and has been determined to be non-compliant with the Federal Safety Red standard as mandated in Appendix D, Section 4, Clause 12 of the Oakhaven Glades Community Regulations. The provided sample failed to register within acceptable parameters. You have 72 hours to remediate or incur a $50 daily fine. I literally snorted coffee out my nose. Federal Safety Red? I'm in a suburban cul-de-sac, not a naval shipyard. The thought of Victoria owning a specialized spectroscopic analysis equipment just to police paint was hilarious and terrifying at the same time. I drove that notice straight to the HOA office, a sterile room that smelled faintly of disinfectant and fear, where Victoria was sitting behind a massive mahogany desk, looking like she'd been sculpted from stainless steel and expensive hairspray, every strand perfectly in place, every surface reflecting light. I tried to reason with her. I really did, appealing to common sense. Victoria, nobody in this community can, or cares to, see the difference between this red and that red. This is beyond excessive. This is harassment. She just smiled that thin, condescending smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes, and pushed the giant, thick rulebook toward me. And I mean, this thing was thicker than any novel I'd ever read, a literal brick of bureaucracy. Did you read the book, Mr. Vance? Do you understand it? She paused for maximum dramatic effect, then pulled out a laser pointer and aimed it at a tiny, italicized subsection on the page. Appendix D, 4.12.2. All specified safety colors must meet a 98% tolerance of the hex color code FF4136, which is Federal Safety Red. Your paint, according to the lab report, is C82E3F. That is a 17% variance, Mr. Vance, and that is a major violation. This is not a democracy, it is a declaration of order and aesthetics. We maintain standards, Mr. Vance, standards you clearly cannot comprehend. I felt this physical jolt, like I'd been slapped with a velvet glove. It hit me right then. The conflict wasn't about the color red, it was about Victoria. She didn't like my flowers, she didn't like my casual independence, and she certainly didn't like that I wasn't instantly intimidated by her. She was using the rules as a weapon to make me submit. This wasn't a bureaucratic error, it was a personal attack veiled in legalism. I stared at that rulebook, That tome, I swear, must have been bound in the skin of someone's hopes and dreams. I understand, Victoria, I said, my voice shockingly calm, which felt like the highest form of insult to her. Thank you for the clarification. I will be fully compliant. And that was it. That was the moment I decided to play her game, but I was going to play it to win, turning her weapon back on her. I went home and locked myself in my office with that rulebook for 2 weeks, armed with a yellow highlighter, 3 pots of black coffee, and a sense of growing, cold fury. I read every single line, every appendix, every footnote, every vague cross-reference. The book itself was a magnificent, poorly edited mess of overlapping regulations and poorly defined exceptions, clearly written by someone who craved absolute control but was utterly incapable of coherent legal writing, a recipe for exploitation. I found 2 loopholes, 2 perfect, gleaming gems of technicality I could drive a truck through. The first, regarding the curb, stated that exterior color changes required submission and approval unless the color was not paint, but a temporary fixture serving a safety or public purpose. Paint requires approval, fixtures do not. This was golden. The second, and far more delicious, was about the trees. The covenants banned all potentially noxious seed-bearing flora except for those listed in Appendix B. My camellias, being a rare, non-native hybrid, were not on the banned list, but crucially, they were also not on the approved list. A perfect gray area. Victoria couldn't touch them. But Victoria's wisteria, that prized lavender hedge she always flaunted, the symbol of her reign, it was on the permanent ban list due to its high toxicity and invasive nature. She had enjoyed a grandfather clause exemption from 10 years ago, allowing her to keep her established plants, but I found a tiny, overlooked addendum inserted during a routine 2023 update that read, all previous exemptions, grandfather clauses, regarding invasive flora listed in Appendix B, 3 are hereby revoked to ensure community-wide ecological conformity. She had written her own doom. Game on, Victoria. I was ready to be petty, precise, and utterly ruthless. My first counterattack was the curb, naturally. Instead of spending a fortune on specialty paint with the right hex code, I ordered 500 feet of industrial, thick, reflective safety tape, the kind they use on emergency vehicles. The tape was precisely federal safety red, verified by the hex code. I spent a grueling Saturday morning measuring and applying every single strip to my curb, making sure it was straight, geometrically perfect, and absolutely dazzlingly reflective. The result was hideous, a hyper-reflective, glaring striped curb that looked less like a suburban street and more like a runway marker for a small regional airport, especially at night. I sent Victoria a new notice, dripping with sickening, lawyerly politeness. Dear Chairwoman Sterling, we have achieved compliance with Section 6 by utilizing a temporary safety fixture, industrial-grade reflective tape, meeting exact hex code FF4136, in lieu of paint. As the tape is temporary and serves a safety purpose, it requires no color approval. Please confirm that my property is now compliant and that the $50 daily fine is rescinded immediately. She called me immediately, and I could hear the grinding of her molars through the phone, the sound echoing the scraping of her pride. Vance, what in God's name do you think you're doing? That curb is tasteless and utterly garish. It cheapens the entire street. I'm sorry, Victoria, I replied, my voice light as a feather, almost cheerful. Is it compliant with the community regulations? That's the only question. You can't fine me for garishness, unless you can find the hex code for garish in Appendix D. I met your 98% tolerance, and I used a non-paint fixture. Legally, you have no grounds. She slammed the phone down. She couldn't do a thing. It was ugly, embarrassing, but breathtakingly legal. The neighbors hated the curb, but they hated Victoria more. The second counterattack was the kill shot, the one I had been waiting for. I prepared a dense 10-page document, citing every relevant clause, every addendum, and every legal precedent I could find related to invasive species on private property. I took glossy, high-resolution photos of her wisteria garden and sent her an official notice via certified mail, which required a signature, ensuring she couldn't claim ignorance. The core paragraph read, Dear Chairwoman Sterling, per Appendix B, 3, as updated 2023, all grandfather clauses for invasive species have been revoked without exception. The Wisteria flora present on your property, a known invasive and toxic species, is therefore a banned species. As a community resident dedicated to upholding the covenants you so cherish, I formally demand that you, as the primary enforcer of these rules, remove the wisteria in its entirety within 7 days. Failure to comply will result in my filing a complaint with the Board of Directors and the State Attorney General's office regarding hostile conduct, selective enforcement, and HOA rule manipulation, potentially leading to the dissolution of the current board. This time, Victoria wasn't just angry, she was volcanic. That entire wisteria garden was her pride and joy, 10 years of carefully manicured, pale purple perfection, featured in local garden tours. She called an emergency board meeting that very evening, circumventing the normal 48-hour notice period. When I walked into the meeting room, the atmosphere was thick, and all eyes were either hostile or terrified. Victoria stood there, her face the exact shade of compliant federal safety red, shaking slightly. "We have a disruptor in our midst," she hissed, staring right through me, her voice tight and high-pitched. "An individual who has deliberately defaced this community's aesthetic with childish, spiteful actions. Mr. Vance is attempting to weaponize petty loopholes to undermine the foundation of Oakhaven Glades. I move that we impose the maximum fine allowed, a $500 daily fine, on him for willful community disruption, effective immediately, pending a full psychiatric evaluation." A few of the neighbors nervously shifted in their seats. They knew she was out of control. I stood up, perfectly composed, giving her no emotional reaction to feed on. "I apologize, Victoria, but I must point out that Article 12, Clause 3 of the HOA Charter explicitly prohibits penalties based on personal sentiment or prejudice without a specific rule violation. Furthermore, state law allows me to challenge any hostile action by the HOA. You are currently in material violation of your own wisteria rule. You are the rule breaker, not I. The board cannot vote on an illegal motion." I pulled out my phone and started a recording app, holding it where everyone could see. "Victoria Sterling, if you successfully impose that fine without due process and without first rectifying your own blatant violation, I will file my complaint with the state tonight. And we will see who has to pull up their garden, who has to face a state-level audit of HOA fund usage, and who faces personal liability for fiduciary misconduct." I looked her dead in the eye, and I smiled, a genuine, cold smile. "Madam Chairwoman, I dare you. Sue me, Victoria. Just sue me." Her jaw worked. Her carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the fact that her face went utterly white. The other board members, seeing the legal risk, immediately tabled her motion. I won that round, but I knew she wouldn't surrender. She vowed revenge. I could see it in her eyes, a deep, burning hatred, the kind that only an entitled person facing accountability can feel. A few days later, I got her final move. Instead of pulling up her wisteria, she used my own gray area against me, twisting the vague language of the rules. Mr. Vance's camellia garden is in violation due to its potential to disseminate noxious seeds, the notice read, citing a clause about preemptive threat assessment. She argued that even if the camellia wasn't banned, it could be deemed a threat if it had the potential to become invasive, citing non-existent peer-reviewed studies. She ordered the HOA maintenance crew to forcibly remove my flowers first thing Friday morning. This was it. This was my moment for the cinematic climax. Victoria had taught me one thing. Compliance is an art of cruelty, and precision is the key to victory. Thursday night, I didn't sleep. I hired a professional landscaping crew, the kind who work for high-end estates and understand property law, especially the tricky nuances of easements. I did not remove the camellias. I had them carefully dug up, root ball intact, and transplanted into 20 massive, beautiful terracotta planters, each one weighing a quarter ton. Then, I gave the instruction. Article 4, Clause 12.1 concerning public easement stated, all public easement space must be used for aesthetic and public purposes and must maintain clear physical separation from private property, unless the item placed is portable containerized flora. I had the crew transfer all 20 crimson camellias and line them up, shoulder to shoulder, forming a solid, impenetrable, and perfectly legal botanical barrier right up against Victoria's living room window. They were placed entirely on the public easement, 6 inches from her property line. completely legal and compliant as portable containerized flora, serving a public aesthetic purpose. The only hitch was they completely blocked out every single ray of sunlight from her favorite room, which also happened to be the room where she hosted her weekly power luncheons. I finished at 4 a.m. The site was glorious. A perfectly legal, well-maintained, lush wall of vibrant red camellias surrounding Victoria's sunniest view, effectively turning her living room into a dark, crimson-hued cave. Friday morning, I sat on my porch, sipping coffee, savoring the moment. Victoria stepped outside, dressed in her immaculate power suit, and she stopped dead. The sound she made was not a scream, but a strangled gasp. She saw the wall of camellias, perfect, manicured, placed legally on public land. She saw her HOA crew pulling up, shovels in hand, ready to destroy my garden. She looked at them, she looked at my beautiful, victorious trees, and she looked straight at me. I smiled, raised my coffee cup in a silent salute, a tiny nod of respect to the worthy opponent she had become. The maintenance crew stood confused, unable to act. The trees were no longer on my property, and they couldn't touch the public easement. And that's when she broke. That look of horror, that complete defeat in the face of her own rules. She was beaten by the very book she had used to terrorize us. Within a month, Victoria was forced to remove her wisteria garden due to the mounting pressure from me and other newly emboldened residents, who finally had the courage to speak up. People had seen her act out in such a petty, ridiculous way, and they used my momentum to successfully petition and vote her out. She resigned in disgrace, her face permanently etched with the realization that the system she relied on had finally turned on her. Oakhaven Glades finally had a little peace, and I had my camellias back in my yard. I won, there's no doubt about that. But what was the cost? I had to become a better, more obsessive version of Victoria to beat her. I sacrificed my own initial desire for quiet to win a completely ridiculous war. I became fluent in bureaucratic cruelty. And here's the controversial part, the confession I have to make to end this whole thing, the true piece of malicious compliance. When Victoria was finally forced to tear out her noxious wisteria, the plants she loved like family, I didn't let them go to the landfill. No, I approached the disposal crew and made them a very sweet, simple offer to take it all. Don't haul that away, I said. Just drop it all off at my old plot, right behind the fence line. What did I do with it? I had no intention of replanting the toxic mess. But I took every piece of that wisteria, I chopped it all up, I had it professionally shredded and cured, and I used it as the thick, dark, organic mulch for my newly replanted camellia garden. The camellia garden I put back in my yard after she was gone. You see, wisteria was banned as a living plant. It was not banned as a decorative wood chip. My triumphant, beautiful crimson camellias are now thriving on a thick, dark layer of Victoria's destroyed, prized wisteria. The perfect, silent, and legal memorial to her terrible reign. Did that go too far? Maybe. Was it necessary to ensure she never, ever came back? Probably. But was it satisfying? Absolutely. But I have to ask you this now. I know I won. But did I become the new Victoria? Does justice always require a little bit of petty vengeance? Or did I cross a line by turning her heartbreak into mulch for my victory garden? Let me know in the comments below. I really need your take on the line between strict compliance and absolute, vicious payback. Should I have stopped at winning the election? Or was that wisteria mulch the perfect ending she deserved? Tell me what you think. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy stories of malicious compliance taken to the absolute limit. I'm Elias, and I'll catch you next time when I find a new rule to break as legally as possible.